just the right size crowd. I'm so glad. I'm Alice Brown. I'm the chair of the Friends of CVU. The Friends of CVU is, what do you want to say, equivalent to a PTO at the K-8 schools we have in our district. But we try to support CVU in any way we can. One of our goals is to help build community, to help facilitate communication between the school and parents and families. Toward that end, we try to do a number of things. We support some connecting youth speakers later on in the year if we can, and so Christine keeps getting all this grant money, doesn't want our money as much, but we do a teacher appreciation lunch in mid-February. We support the Grad Challenge breakfast, or Grad Challenge senior celebration day in May. And we always have the dessert with the principal, which is a chance for us to hear from the principal. And last year was come meet new principal Adam Bunting. And this year we actually get to hear something with more meat at it. This was Adam's.
Nice.
No,
yeah, thanks. Appreciate that. It's dessert on the principal, apparently.
Adam, we originally scheduled this for early November, and Adam asked if we could switch this to early October before conferences and before first quarter grades came out, because part of what he could help talk to us about is proficiency-based grading. But more importantly, we're going to hear about where CVU is now, where we're going, where we've been, and kind of get a thumbnail sketch of what's going on. So thank you very much, Adam.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Alice. So first of all, I just would, don't clap for me. I want to clap for Friends of CVU, because they are so awesome. I also want to thank you for coming tonight. Particularly, my dad sent me this photo today of where he was in Peacham, Vermont, and it's a perfect fall night out there. I know that. I've also heard the Red Sox may be on at some point. At 8 o'clock, we'll be done well before then, don't worry, unless you ask lots of questions, which is okay. So let's see here. So I promised tonight would be as jargon-free as possible, and I plan on continuing that. So my presentation is really going to break into 3 components. And to be completely jargon-free, it's basically going to be like stuff I think you know already, stuff you may be less familiar with, and then so what, why does this stuff matter, how does it affect my kid now? So the first part of this, it's hard to have a presentation in a high school without thinking about learning and the nature of learning. So I'm going to ask you just for a moment to think about what the last new thing was that you learned. And I want you to also think about how you went about getting that learning. Okay, so I put up some examples. I don't know if anyone took up golf or maybe some type of CrossFit, guitar playing, cooking. Just talk with the person next to you about a minute, and then we'll come back together. Thank you. So I did forget to mention that we are filming this, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to send this out to parents through celebrations tomorrow, unless there are lots of awkward moments that happen, and you have that power to ask me those really difficult questions that I would then need to edit out later or figure out how to handle. So just to warn you, if you don't want to be on camera, well, you're kind of stuck now. So anyone have any 2 examples, something new that you just learned and how you went about getting that learning? I can call on people. We talked about creating awkwardness before this, so I feel comfortable calling on you. Yeah.
Okay, so in July, I had my grandfather's saxophone refurbished, and I hadn't played saxophone before, but now I am, and there was a lot of squeaking, and my son plays sax and he doesn't squeak, and I asked him a little bit about that, and then I learned by trying to squeak and then not trying to squeak.
Excellent. And did you have any kind of examples to follow, or was your son instructing you? How are you getting feedback on that?
Yes, I asked him a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And then I tried a lot.
Okay, just a lot of practice.
Lots of practice.
Okay, did you get any grades on the experience?
Yes.
You did. Okay.
Yes, because people hear you when you play.
Excellent.
So they're like.
So you had a real audience.
Yeah, it was like a D-ish.
So we would call that you had an authentic assessment there. Excellent, great. So how about one more? and I'm happy to call randomly too. Yes, thank you.
I started a new job that's in a new industry in May, and so I had to learn lots of things. They did a really good job of, setting up for me to go meet and talk to different people. So, one way was talking to people, asking questions. Other was just, reading materials, working with software, so some online time, WebEx time. So all sorts of different ways.
So I love that example. So the example is about a new job, and there's really not much I like less than starting a brand new job and that feeling in the first few days and that sort of crushing, overwhelming, am I going to be able to get it all, and who am I going to sit with at lunch? That question still pops up. But I also would ask you to imagine and just think about what would it be like doing the training for that job 3 years before having that job, right? So the importance of when we're focusing on kind of the learning that matters now and how that's different when we're studying for something theoretical in the future. So I'm bringing up these examples. I'm trying to engage you a little bit, and I'm trying to activate some of your memories to interest you a little bit more in this presentation. But really, I just want to talk about myself. So I'm going to share some of my new learning. So this is not a picture of me. This very well could have been a picture of me playing Little League. I was the worst Little League baseball player you've ever seen. I cried every time I struck out. It was a little too intense, possibly. And I actually had a 0 batting average in 7th and 8th grade. Getting glasses actually helped eventually. But I developed many mental scars around baseball, and I'm thankful for that because I eventually found lacrosse, which was a passion for me and got me into coaching and things along those lines. But baseball was a challenging experience for me. The only real happy moment I had was I did hit a home run. I think I hit like a .05 batting average, and one of them was a home run because I popped it over the first baseman's head and I just kept running. And in Little League, you know how that works with all the missed throws. So I've had this long, just this pain with baseball for my entire life. And a few years ago, I was asked to play in this adult baseball league. Actually, it's called the Vermont Senior League, I'll be honest. So I was asked to play in the Senior League. And I was thinking to myself, maybe this is my chance for redemption. Maybe this is my chance to go towards something that I'd always struggled with. And plus, my brother was doing it, my friends were doing it, and I was getting left out of all the fun, so I decided I'd try it. The problem is I never really learned how to hit a baseball. And trying to learn how to hit a baseball as an adult, I sort of wonder if that's more complicated than when you're younger, because this is what I decided to look at. And so it turns out hitting a baseball is pretty complex, particularly when that baseball is not sitting still like it is there, and it could be a curveball, or it could be someone throwing the ball at you really hard and you're jumping out of the way and embarrassing yourself. Not that happened at too many of my at-bats. So I knew I wanted to learn how to do this. Thankfully, I've had some experience with learning, and I think about it all the time. So I decided to set myself up knowing what I've learned about learning as I've been teaching and principling over the years. So I really focused on my progress over my first few seasons was setting an attainable goal. That's really important. For me, I wasn't out to be any kind of a rock star, although I may have had some visions of grandeur around that. But really just making contact was my goal in terms of hitting the baseball. I also knew I would need lots of examples and exemplars. And thankfully, I had a team around me, and we have some folks who played at UVM. We actually have one guy who played AAA for the Red Sox for a game or two. So that was a little intimidating, but he was great. I knew I would need tons of practice because I'm creating new neural networks in my brain. I'm actually rewiring my brain. And I knew I'd need the help of some experts, and I had this great team. So they were always willing to give me probably too much advice at times. And we have a culture on our team where it's safe to fail. So striking out was okay. So it wasn't this high-stakes experience every time I came to bat. I knew my team was going to be supportive, at least for the first couple of years when I was struggling. because they too would struggle at times. I had lots of feedback. Feedback is the thing that we don't talk about much in learning, and we're talking about it more as people study video games, and we start thinking about, we talk about grit all the time, right? Like, we're always wondering, why is it that students sometimes in class are so easily will quit on something, but if you watch them play a video game, they will try the same level, the same task, defeating the same boss over and over and over and over. And what we begin to learn about video games is there's a lot of subtle feedback that you're getting that's not high stakes. You can just keep trying and keep trying and keep trying. And so, I mean, I kind of had that experience. Every time I was at bat, if I didn't hit the ball, there's feedback. If I hit the ball, there's feedback. If I hit it in this direction, there's feedback. So I was able to learn quickly in a, well, somewhat, sort of quickly, in a low stakes way. More practice. And then something that we forget a lot about in education, and that's the power of reflection. To slow down, process what's happening. So there's no, I mean, this is all just, a lot of it's common sense. We know this. But the fun part about being in education these days is that the brain science is really clear now about how the brain actually works. I would recommend, if you're interested in a cool book, it's called The Art of Changing the Brain by James Zoll. And this is a graphic from the book, and they're talking about this learning cycle and the parts of the brain that are activated that you can study through MRIs and what's actually happening. So you've got some complex versions here of how we learn and the learning cycle. You've got down to the very simple. So fancy, simple. The bottom line is the brain research suggests almost kind of the stuff that you've known. We learn most efficiently. We're really good learners, but we want to maximize learning and we want to maximize our efficiency, right? So we learn when we care. Traditionally, high schools have not always been awesome with that when we think about our history, our past, possibly. We learn when we have a culture of honesty and safety. So this is huge. You hear me this is why I do the CVU celebrations. You hear me talking about it again and again. A culture of honesty and a culture of safety is absolutely vital. There's nothing for me that was more frustrating as a classroom teacher than when I would hear students feel this need, and maybe not even intentionally, to be competitive. And to be competitive meant getting my approval. And getting my approval meant putting on some type of facade where they were trying to make me think they were smart in every moment. And thus you couldn't get really honest answers because you've got this weight of the grade hanging in there. And so as a teacher, I always cared a lot about how do we move forward as a class? How do we work together? But this culture of honesty and safety is really important. Plus all the studies, if you want to look at some fun studies on the amygdala in the brain and what happens to our learning process when we get nervous, and the MRIs around that, and our inability to take in information when we're scared and when we're stressed. It's really exciting stuff to look at. Clear goals. We need to be very purposeful in the goals that we're setting for ourselves and the goals that we're getting students to set for themselves, helping them set goals, and sometimes setting goals for them, but building them into that process. We need to have concrete experiences. There's some really fun research out there about the power of trying to correct misconceptions. And oftentimes what we'll do in a classroom is we'll say, oh, no, you're thinking about it the wrong way. And then try to explain through theory how someone's thinking about something in the wrong way, or even worse, doing a skill in the wrong way. The problem is that when you have a misconception, that's actual wiring in your brain. And listening probably isn't enough to overcome that misconception. You have to have real concrete experiences that help you rewire the brain. So we talk about, again, the importance of meaningful feedback, the ability to make adjustments in what we're learning, and the voice and choice. That probably ties back into being engaged and into caring. So at CVU, you've probably seen some of our terminology. We're pushing, I would say, really hard right now to incorporate what we know about good learning, what we know about brain research, and trying to bring that and break some of our own old habits that have been in the education system for a real long time. So part of it is developing a common language as a faculty and with students. So you'll hear, when we talk about clear goals, I know this is hard to see in the back, most times when you walk into a classroom these days, you'll see purpose statements. So this is why we're doing the lesson today. This is the skill we're working on. Learning targets. So just being really clear with our language. Here's what we're shooting for. Attached with learning targets are scales. So how do we move towards that target that we're trying to get? Benchmarks, examples. We talk about the importance of concrete experiences. A lot of learning activities. Hands-on learning activities. We know that's really important. Immediate feedback and reflection. And this is probably some of the bigger changes. And again, this is stuff that I'm sure you know that we've been talking about at CVU for a few years, that lots of schools around the state are talking about. But the power of formative assessments. How do we set students up to practice skills in ways that where they don't feel it's high stakes and that they're being judged? Because we know when your brain senses it's being judged, there are a lot of students, me included, we tend to shut down a little bit. So how do we allow people to practice without making it high stakes? So that when you see formative assessment, that's really what it means. And then of course, there are times there are times when we do have to demonstrate that we know things. You know, you think about coaching is always a good comparison here. You think about practices as formative assessments and games as summative assessments. There are times, just in the system that we're in, we still have to be able to measure progress. So now we're going to start getting into, I think that those are some concepts about learning that we're more familiar with. They're concepts about learning that we've probably acquired over our lives. I want to talk a little bit now about learning in the 21st century and some places that we're moving towards as a high school that I think is a little different. Okay? I'm going to ask you to watch, this is about a 3-minute clip from the movie Most Likely to Succeed. Has anyone seen that? Oh, good. So it's just a short clip, and it's talking about some of the complexities of learning in the 21st century.
For all of human history, the primary focus of education has been acquiring more content knowledge. And the only way to get it is through the teacher, right? You don't have to do that anymore. Today, content is ubiquitous. It's free. It's on every internet-connected device. And it's growing exponentially and changing constantly. The world simply no longer cares how much our kids know. What the world cares about is what they can do with what they know, which is a completely different education problem.
When we were growing up, parents and teachers talked about work ethic, that you really had to want to work hard. But it turns out in the 21st century, work ethic isn't good enough. You can't just intend to work hard. You actually have to know what to do next yourself. You have to be motivated and you have to have knowledge about what is the next step I ought to be taking.
If we can compete with other countries, it's got to be in producing citizens capable of innovative thinking. Not citizens capable of industrial production, not citizens capable of assembling iPads. We're going to lose if that's what we think we're producing. The old blue-collar industrial model of education is already gone. We're already living in its wake.
So what is everyone looking for? They're looking for people who can do critical thinking and problem solving. ... in order to get an interview. Critical thinking and problem solving are really table stakes today. They assume you've got that. What everyone's really looking for are people who can not only do their job, but invent, reinvent, and re-engineer their job while they're doing it.
A recent study by the RAND Corporation found out that among the state tests that are used for accountability, only about 2% of the items on the math tests measure higher order thinking skills. 98% of the items are, can you apply an algorithm and do the procedure? The problem with that is that quite often people who can identify a particular problem format and crank out an answer, or find and guess an answer from a list of 5, which schools spend a lot of time on, cannot reason their way through a mathematical application in the real world.
We have to prepare students to be resilient, to be thinkers, to be collaborators, to be communicators. We have to prepare them in such a different way.
I think there's a sharp trade-off between what can be tested easily on a large scale and what's important in life. Think of a different universe where you're asking kids to invent a science experiment, write a creative essay, come up with an interesting historical perspective on an event they care about. Far more important challenges for a kid, far more aligned with what they need to do in the real world when they graduate. Much harder to test and very hard to say you got a 731 on this experiment, somebody else got a 627 on the experiment. So that's the existential trade-off we face in education.
Creativity cannot be taught, but it can be killed. Because to me, creativity and entrepreneurship and in the spirit to innovate, they all are human nature. We can enhance it, we can make it better, but more importantly, a lot of times we discourage by forcing people to do what other people think is right, to force people to find answers, not ask questions, to force them to shoot for answers very efficiently, not ask them to explore.
There's some really big questions here is, what should we be teaching? You know, who are our major stakeholders? So getting that consensus among all of the players, the parents, the teachers, the business community, the politicians, of this is what we want our end product to look like. This is what we want the students coming out prepared to do, not just to know. Until you get that aligned, getting tough doesn't matter, because you're getting tough on what?
I would argue that beyond the morality of this issue, it's simply a matter of self-interest for all of us. Because if we don't train and teach and really support children from all these backgrounds, they become our responsibility or our fear, the source of our fear. Because we have to teach them about what we consider most important in our society. This is not about something that would be nice to do. This is about the very essence of our future. This is about who we become as a nation.
So, Most Likely to Succeed does a very nice job of putting out some of the tension that we experience as parents and that we experience as an education system and that some of our students experience. And some of the tension is between this is the stuff we know and this is the stuff we're moving towards. Some of the tension is between trying to set up our kids to succeed in all the things that are going to get you into a competitive college versus maybe getting them to succeed in ways that we know will help them excel beyond college. We have some other statistics from Most Likely to Succeed. This disturbing trend nationally that students who enter four-year colleges, 36.6% are graduating in 5 years. That doesn't mean, you can look at that stat in a few ways. Read it in the way that's scary. Okay? Two-year colleges, we've got 29.1% students graduating. And graduating or not, the average national debt, nationally, the average debt for students is $35,000. I've seen some different statistics on this. This is from, I think, 2014, so some of those numbers have changed since then. But, I mean, that's a little scary to me. I feel a real sense of guilt sometimes as a principal when I think about what our diplomas have meant in the past. And when I think about some students who are walking across the stage who have managed to get through their classes, either doing very well academically or not. They've managed to get through our system and have been able to not develop some skills that are really important. I often point to my first year as principal in Montpelier when I had a student who had just written me a letter a couple weeks before because he had gotten in some trouble. And I read it like 2 days before graduation. And I was looking, I mean, the punctuation wasn't there. I mean, there was just some basic writing skills. I'm like, my God, this kid made it through the entire system and actually didn't do that badly. So we need to be really thoughtful about that's so unfair to then put a kid into a college experience where they're incurring a huge amount of debt. There's no way for us to start our young people, and I take this really seriously. Here's another statistic that I think is important, and I believe it. 65% of jobs for middle schoolers haven't even been invented yet. I mean, think about how much the job market's changed in just the past 15 years. I saw a presentation not long ago where they're like, okay, where are the bank tellers? Wait, the airport's sort of automated now. But, I mean, you start thinking about, geez, what happens if, we get cars that drive themselves? What happens to the auto insurance industry? What happens to people issuing tickets? We're in a changing world, and that's. I think it's. I tried to resist that truth for a while, but I've sort of decided to move towards that. Here's another one. 96% of academic provosts believe students are prepared, and this is from college, and versus 11% of employers. So I don't want to blame the higher education system. I think in high schools we need to do a better job. We need to do a better job of getting kids out in the community, and we need to do a better job of getting kids to think about the ways in which they want to engage in the world. And I don't mean selecting specific careers at a young age, right? I think about the skill set that I use in this job. I can be pretty happy as long as I'm critical thinking, as long as I am communicating. There's a lot of things that I'd be happy doing because of the ways I want to engage with the world. I want to work with people. That's important to me. I mean, we all have that. And a lot of times when we think about career readiness, we're just putting kids through like these career prep programs instead of thinking like, what are the deep skills? What are your strengths? What are your challenges? Most importantly, what are your interests? So that brings up to me like this idea that that this stat speaks to, that college grads who had opportunities to apply classroom learning to internships, jobs, or ambitious projects, applying their learning, are twice as likely to be engaged in work later in life. For those of us who went to college, I remember that experience of like, I've got to declare a major in my freshman year? I don't know anything. Are you kidding me? Why are you asking me that? How would I know what I want to do? But we can do that in high schools. So what you're going to see, you're going to see at CVU this year, and what you've seen for a long time actually is this ethic around the importance of getting students out, not babysitting students. I think Grad Challenge speaks to that. What a forward-thinking project that's been. Graduation Challenge started in my senior year when I was here. So it was like 20-ish something years ago, right? So that project was always meant to evolve. It hasn't. I mean, we've made some amazing progress with it over the years, but it hasn't spread out to 9th, 10th, 11th grade so that it's not this add-on in the senior year, that it becomes a rich experience. So that we're moving towards this system where we want to ensure that our students are powerful thinkers, communicators, learners, citizens, problem solvers, and have it be less about how well they're doing on the SATs. Though my belief is that when we're succeeding here, they're also doing well in standardized testing. That seems to bear out. I don't know if you've seen this picture at all. I've sent it out through celebrations a lot. These are our graduation standards. You probably have no chance of reading them from where you're sitting right now. But they speak to the big skills, the skills we really want students to be powerful in before they leave. So you hear proficiency-based learning throughout the state, standards-based learning. I don't like the term proficiency-based learning. That seems to be shooting a little bit low. Yeah, we're going to make everybody average. That's awesome. No, we got to focus on, we have 5 higher order thinking skills we want our students to be powerful in, not just proficient. The other term that's going around the state quite a bit is the term PLP. Can you just raise a hand if you've heard those letters? Okay, so the idea with PLP is it's a personalized learning plan. Here's the problem with the letters PLP. It's the second P that's a problem. We need to stop thinking about a plan and start thinking about a process. Because if we really want to have personalized education, we need to think about what's the process that we're setting up in our schools so that students are constantly reflecting, constantly connecting the learning together. I always try to point out kind of the idea of a PLP, it's the connective tissue between classes, right? Think about all the experiences that you had in high school. You go from this class to this class to this class to this class to this class, and those teachers aren't talking to each other, by the way. And then you go from those classes to those, and then you do whatever you do outside of school, right? And that's not connected to those individual classes. And the outside of school is not talking to school. Well, there is one constant through that, and that's you, and that's the self, and that's the person who's doing the growing. So when we think about personalized learning plans, really what I think we're trying to do is get a student to become the center of their education. And I love this picture. I snapped this in the hall last year of Aaron doing this self-portrait. And when you think about the personalized learning process that we're moving towards, that's kind of what we're talking about. How do we give students a deep sense of who they are before they leave high school? To make meaning of that, to make meaning of all those experiences. Here we're talking about a four-stage process. And we're stealing some stuff from South Burlington. They've been doing roundtables for years. But we're doing exhibitions, roundtables, the idea of a defense. Think about how different it is if we're asking our students in their junior year, which is important, by the way, not their senior year. Our experience with senior year, when you do grad challenge, there are times when you see skill deficits, when we see their papers or presentation, we're like, 2 weeks until they graduate, right? Like, oh, that's not enough time. So imagine when we're saying to students, your job is to make meaning of this data that you've experienced through your classes, outside your experiences beyond your classes. And it's your job to tell us why you're ready to graduate. It's your job to own your learning journey, instead of us holding the keys. How do you help students own those keys? And it comes all the way back to that first slide about caring about what you're doing. So we're playing around with some of this stuff. Last year, we had all ninth graders do exhibitions. It was a very small step. It was also a step to be compliant with Act 77 in the law. This year, we're going to be playing around with how do we evolve some of those exhibitions into roundtables. And the exhibitions were a lot of fun. This is Lila. She's my advisee. So she was talking about her art class and how she was able to connect her art class to some of her learning in English and even to horseback riding. And she was showing these formative assessments of this picture of herself that she was drawing, the self-portrait she was doing. And it was just really cool to see how she tracked that, but then was able to reflect on it and think about kind of this idea of this growth mindset. She was in this place where she thought of herself as a terrible artist. I was like, Lila, are you kidding me? Like, look, that's awesome. But she needed to have that experience. So this is where people tend to get fired up. I know a couple of years ago, Dessert with the Principal got interesting. I think 400 people showed up to talk about, because we were talking about standards-based learning and the grading system. And I admire Jeff. He got through that experience and is continuing to really kind of work with us to shape is how we move towards some different ways of reflecting. But clearly, we as a community need to talk about grading and reporting, because people get so anxious about it, right? Because we think they're gonna prevent my kid from getting into a good college, and that's gonna prevent my kid from getting a good job, and it's gonna prevent my kid from, I don't know, getting married and buying a house and then having 2 kids. I don't know. It all gets tied in there together. So we've moved towards a system called Jump Rope. Many of you how many people have seen Jump Rope reports in the past? Can I see some hands? Okay, so for this year, our school has moved. So every classroom teacher now reports out on Jump Rope. Okay, so it's standards-based grading. Every single one of our learning targets, which will be reflected here, are tied into our graduation standards now, which is pretty neat. And what you're going to have the chance to do, we're opening our portal, sounds sort of science fiction-y, to jump rope in basically the first week of November, you're going to have the ability to, with your student, go in, look at learning targets. So you're going to see comments here. You're still going to see a grade like, you know, we've always been able to do, but you're going to be able to see how they're doing on individual learning targets. If you want, you can then click on this, see the assessments that unfold, and then you can also click on a view of what it looks like in terms of how they're progressing towards the graduation standards. And again, so we have each of the graduation standards, and then we have the evidence for how they're doing in those graduation standards. I'm going to be really honest. I don't have a huge amount of faith in the validity of those numbers yet, right? But that's okay, because what we're trying to do is empower our students and our parents and us as teachers to make sense of the data in a meaningful way. Do I have faith in the validity of the grades? As much faith as I've always had in grades. And you can interpret that in any way you want. Okay? But what you're seeing is that, again, it's moving from this individual experience of this classroom, that, to a system. A lot of real world application. It's funny to see how this is spreading throughout the building right now. The more we talk about it, you've got a group of teachers and students who really want to innovate. Fun to see just the various ways in which students are engaging with the community in different ways. Talk more about that later. So talking about like how it's going to look different now. You're going to see graduation standards. You're going to be able to see progress towards those graduation standards. You're not going to hear us talk about quarters and semesters anymore, and semester exams, although we do have exams. We're going to be talking about reporting periods and snapshots, right? So grades are cumulative instead of being averaged out. So we always give the example of, your driving test, right? So I didn't pass my permit test a couple of times. I'm really glad that the instructor didn't average my first attempt in with my last attempt, because I probably still wouldn't be driving. So we have to think about our grades that way in our classes. We're looking at the most recent data. So you're going to be getting emails from me saying, hey, this is a traditional interim marking time. This is traditional quarter time. Please sit down with your student, go into the portal, and look at how they're doing based on all the units that have been completed for right now. And you can look the next day. And you don't want to look too much. That kind of happens with these live portals. I've had that experience before. I don't know if anyone else has ever tried to be on a diet in the past. But when you start weighing yourself every day, it's apparently not a very good thing to do, as I've learned. Anyway, enough about me. You're going to see more consistency. That's important. Again, when we develop a common language, students and teachers we're talking in the same way now. I'll tell you that when I started at CVU in 1999, I was a core teacher in the Fairbanks Corps. And I'll never forget meeting with the former teacher. I said, okay, what's my curriculum? And I was given 4 books: Knight, Romeo and Juliet, Odyssey, and Gilgamesh. I remember thinking like, okay, but what else is there? Like, there's got to be more. It's just these books. What you see now as the school evolves is this focus on, we have common learning targets. We have common scales. We have a way to approach teaching together so that it's not just the content, though that's important too. The open portal I mentioned, and then more chances for reflection, exhibition roundtables, and then we're also evolving Grad Challenge. So that, again, the goal at some point is that students are always engaged in these deep, self-directed learning projects. I think the thing that people are going to get most upset about, and I'll be able to gauge this reaction with the crowd right now. So we are now having honor roll only being published at semester times. The reason for that is, we want that list to be robust and accurate that we're putting out. And at the quarters, sometimes you're not really getting, a student hasn't often had enough experience within a class to do well enough to be on that list. For those who are going to complain about that, the one thing I'll tell you is that if it were up to me, I probably wouldn't be publishing an honor roll at all, because I don't like the everyone has the ability to sort of say, oh, these are the kids on the honor roll. Well, now I know who's not on it too, which doesn't seem right to do with someone who's really maybe trying hard, but the learning's not coming as easily. So let's shame them as a community. It doesn't seem like a right thing. Having said that, academic excellence is always important, and we're holding that line too. So there we go.
I think we should be respectful of people's time.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, I could talk all night like this. I love
So
it.
I
Yeah.
think if we want to thank Adam, please grab a dessert on your way out, and I bet Adam will be happy to take some more questions if you want to catch him
Sure.
one-on-one up there. So thank you so much, Adam.
Thank you.